We're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to do a story time about the Hat Man encounter that I had. It happened when I was about 20 years old, and I was heavily pregnant with my first child, which is my son. But before we go into that encounter, we need to go back to the beginning. Ever since I was a child, I would always be able to see things that weren't always there, that other people were not able to see. The proverbial monster under the bed or in the closet as a child when you're terrified and your parents tell you, oh, it's nothing, and they turn on a light and they leave. But as a child, you're so perceptive to everything in the world, and you know it wasn't just nothing because you know you saw what you saw. There was a lot of loss in my family when I was a young child. The first one being my brother when I was just 10 years old, and paranormal activity definitely amped up after that. My mom and my stepdad were in the process of getting a divorce, and we were getting ready to leave and move out of the house that we had been in for many, many years. And it was just me and my mom in the home, and there was an old style telephone. This was in the late 80s. All the phone lines were already turned off. The power was turned off. The phone was cord wrapped around it, sitting on the top of the box in the kitchen. And I was about 11 years old when this happened, and out of nowhere, the phone rings. So as a curious 11-year-old, of course you're going to pick up the phone wondering why it's ringing when it's not even plugged into the wall. And the moment that the phone was lifted and put to my ear, there was a very angry, old, grumpy man voice that came through the phone saying, "Get out of my house." If my mom had not been standing there listening to the whole thing, I probably would have thought that I was losing my mind at such a young age with all the stress going on in my family at the time. However, that wasn't the case, because there was also several messages left on the answering machine of the same guy with the same voice, saying the same thing. Very menacing. So we're going to fast forward quite a few years until I was about 16 years old. And I know it seems like I'm jumping around, but it's all going to pull together in the end, so just please bear with me. So when I was 16, me and my sister and my mom were driving in a car, and I was telling my sister about this dream that I had the night before, which was a pretty crazy dream. Basically, I was living in some type of huge, like, plantation style house. I was much older and I had 2 children. And the house caught on fire, and I died in the fire, but my sister got my children out. And in spirit form, I was looking at myself on the outside of this house burning, seeing my 2 children with my sister. Now, the crazy part is that before I even finished telling the dream, my sister finished the dream for me. We had the same exact dream pretty much at the same exact time. At the time, I kind of thought it was cool, a little insignificant. I'm like, I don't understand what this means, but I was intrigued. So now we're going to fast forward to my age 20. And I was living in this apartment with my now ex-husband, and I was very heavily pregnant with my first child, was my son. And it was probably no more than 30 days before he was to be born. And many women out there know that when you're that heavily pregnant, sleep is far and few between and very hard to find. You just can't get comfortable. So my husband at the time was already asleep in the bed, and I'm laying there tossing and turning, trying to get comfortable. And I just had this complete sense of foreboding come over my whole entire body. Not understanding, of course, I start looking around and I see this really tall figure standing at the end of my bed. He was in between 8 and 10 foot tall, had a wide brim hat on. The brim went all the way around, and very wide shoulders, and he was wearing some type of cloak. Now, mind you, I'm fully awake at this time, not sleeping at all whatsoever, but a paralysis did come over my body to the point where I couldn't talk and I could not move. And all the while, this hat man with red glowing eyes standing at the end of my bed was just staring at me. You could feel the evil coming off of this thing. It's indescribable, the fear and the malice that you feel coming off of this thing. It was almost like it had my husband at the time, like under some type of hypnosis, because it didn't even seem like he was breathing. It was very strange. Like, I was very aware of all of my surroundings. And the thing that I remember the most was this foreboding feeling of knowing that it wanted my child. In the moment that I felt that come over me, I got very angry. Mama Bear just came out and I got really mad. It was at the point where I was not in fear anymore, but I was pissed. And I remember feeling like, no, you cannot have my child. And it was shortly after I got really angry that it dissipated from my view, and I heard a huge loud bang in my kitchen area. And at that point, my husband at the time woke up. We ran into the kitchen because I was telling him I saw someone in the bedroom, and every single cabinet and drawer was open in the kitchen, and all the contents were dumped out onto the floor. All the pots and pans, silverware, and you name it, it was on the floor. So needless to say, I thought it was the place that I was staying in, not knowing about generational curses or anything like that. And that was the last night that I stayed in that apartment. I packed my stuff and I left. I never saw the thing again after that, but it accomplished what it came to do, which leads me into the next part of my story. By this time, I was a single mom. My son was about 3, maybe 4 years old. And I had just laid him down for a nap. We were in a totally different apartment, totally different location. And it was maybe 30 minutes into his nap when he woke up screaming bloody murder, crying the most intense fear that I've ever heard a cry come from my son. And he was a very happy child, very smart child, very intelligent. So when I went into the room and was comforting him, and I was like, Bubba, what's wrong? What's wrong? Tell mommy what's going on. He says, Mom, you remember that one time a long, long time ago when you were my mommy before and you died in that house fire and Auntie saved me and my sister? And at that point, I got the chills all over my body. I started crying profusely because I was like, wow, that encounter that me and my sister had with the same dream, that has to be real, right? My son is only 3.5 and he's repeating the same thing that me and my sister had. And he wasn't even around when we were talking about that. He wasn't even born yet, nothing. So naturally, this experience is what led me into researching reincarnation and got me into New Age and witchcraft. And all glory be to the Father and His Son for delivering me from that. But this all goes back into generational curses. Some of this is part of my testimony, which I will be sharing in a different video. So you see, the Hat Man had been around ever since I was a child, gave information to my sister in a dream, gave information to me in a dream, visited me while I was pregnant with my son, gave the information to my son like a demon hotline. All of this can be broken. No one has to live with this kind of fear. There's so many times in scripture where it says, do not fear. Father always has us. I'm telling everyone this story so that they can understand the real truth of generational curses and be able to break it, and to understand that Hat Man is very real and he's a demon, and you can rebuke him in the name of Yahusha. I pray you all have a blessed day. I love you, family. Shalom.